You've probably heard this a million times about just being yourself and you'll be able to grow your business by attracting the right audience and clients into your ecosystem. Most people have no idea who they are. And I guess that's kind of like leading into why I think just being yourself is not always the most helpful thing to be saying to somebody. You've probably heard this a million times about just being yourself and you'll be able to grow your business by attracting the right audience and clients into your ecosystem, regardless of where your business is in terms of growth. It literally doesn't matter. If you show up as you are, who you are, everything will be fine and you'll attract the right audience and the right clients at the right time. And on the surface, I would say this probably does sound like something that might help. But what if this advice is not as helpful as it first may seem? And I'll explain why I think this is good advice and it is something good to do, but only when certain other aspects are undertaken before this as an individual. And that's kind of the reason for me creating this podcast episode in the first place, is to give my kind of insights into why I think this is a good thing to do, but only when certain aspects of an individual are known. And this is like exactly what I'll talk about in a moment. If most people have no idea who they are, and I would say that's just not entrepreneurs in general, I would say like that's most people. And I'm confident in saying this because this is what I went through and this is what I used to think like, and this is what I've come to realize over the last few years, like particularly in the last 5 years. If you were to ask most entrepreneurs what they value or what their values are, most would not be able to answer. They would kind of pluck some stuff out of the air, or some may kind of say what they think is the right thing. If you were to ask most entrepreneurs, what beliefs do you have about the world, about business, and about life? Most might not even know how to answer this in the first place. And I guess that's kind of like leading into why I think just being yourself is not always the most helpful thing to be saying to somebody. And again, I'll give like a couple of examples of why I believe this to be true, at least from my perspective. And like I mentioned in the beginning, I would say up until the last few years, I would also put myself into this category of people. I've mentioned this like previously on earlier podcasts. It wasn't until I was the age of maybe 29 to 31, maybe even 32, where I actually started to dig into who I was. What are my beliefs around growing a business? What are my beliefs about the world? And what do I value, and what's my take on the things that happen? And it's only now I'm starting to tap into that. And by no means I understand every aspect, but it's a process. And yeah, like I mentioned, I had no idea who I was because I had pretty much zero understanding of who I was. Yes, I could look back at some patterns. Yes, I could look back at some aspects of starting a business, growing a business, and then building a team, all of that other stuff. There are patterns of behavior that I could look at. But in terms of having a level of self-awareness, that just wasn't there. So if I didn't know who I was, how could I just show up and be myself? And recently I found that it helps to have just a small amount of awareness of not just myself, but my own values and my own beliefs, and to even question those beliefs. Because ultimately, most of the beliefs that we have are stories that we've told ourselves over and over again about certain things and the way things are and the way they're supposed to be, or they're stories that we've taken on by other people. Again, this isn't like the podcast about stories or beliefs, but it's just most of us never look at what they are for ourselves. And I think this ties into how can you show up and just be you if you don't know what you believe about the world, if you don't know what stories you're telling yourself. And on top of all of the things of, having an awareness of myself, my values and beliefs, I think having an awareness of the world around me, like why are the things the way they are? Why do I perceive things to be the way they are? And again, it's all linked into stories and beliefs. But by looking at myself first, I can have a level of understanding of who I am and then show up and be myself. So as I mentioned, I'll provide like a couple of examples how I've seen this play out in my life over the last couple of years. And I would say most people fall into this to some degree or another. Everyone's at different stages and different levels, but I honestly believe that until you look at who you are, it's impossible to show up and just be yourself, because you don't know what that is. Actually, here's two scenarios I've seen play out in my life over the last couple of years, and it's probably pretty common, like I just mentioned. So before looking at myself, my values and my beliefs, and just my own perception in general of the world and business, it's have some kind of level of awareness that most things I think I'd need to write or talk about. So what most others are talking about in the area that I'm in. So what I mean is, before I started to delve into my own stories, beliefs, and interpretations of the world, I didn't know what they were. So I would lean into what I think sounded right. I would lean into what I saw most other people talking about. And if I resonated with that to some level, or if I thought that's what I should be connecting with or speaking about, that's what I would lean into, not knowing if that was true for me or not. And what tended to happen, and again, this I can see this in different people that kind of go through this phase. And like I mentioned, I went through this phase like a long time. And I would say when you don't know who you are, what tends to happen is it usually comes across as mixed messages. It usually comes across as a diluted message from the thing that you're saying. It's you end up sounding like everybody else. You don't really take a stand for anything. It's really, really hard to stand out, and you end up not speaking up for what you believe in, because ultimately you don't really know what you believe in because you don't look at and question the beliefs and stories and interpretations that we have. When you tie all of that together, it's actually harder to connect with people because you're trying to please everybody rather than please the people or resonate with the people that share the same values, beliefs, and interpretations of the world that you do. And I would say, after looking at who I am in the last couple of years, especially this year and last year, I would say it's easy for me now to have a clear message, and easy for me to speak up, and it's easy for me to understand what's important for me because they align with what I perceive as my values. And like I mentioned in the beginning, it wasn't until very recently that I actually looked at what are my values, what do I value, and until then, how could I possibly show up and just be myself? Because I would be repeating what I thought people would want to hear, or I would be repeating what I thought would be the right thing to say. I even value the right thing that I thought other people would appreciate me sharing my values, and I didn't know what they were. So by knowing my values, I'm able to take a stand against things that are against the values that I have. And in doing so, this also attracts the right people into my audience and my ecosystem for every company and business that I'm involved in, including this podcast. So we take a stand against hustling and overworking, because it eventually leads to burnout and fatigue in some way or another. So that's one thing that I've taken a stand against, because it's something that I value, which is health and well-being. But if I did not know all of these things, like really deep dive into them, then it would be impossible for me to sit here and record a podcast episode around taking a stand against something when I didn't even know if it was something that I valued, like deep down. It's not that I'm saying not to do something and not show up who you are, but before that, I think it's a good idea to, like, by looking and questioning like my own beliefs and your own beliefs, I'm able to talk about the world and entrepreneurship as I see things today, and not through the lens of other people's opinions. Because when you speak through the lens of other people's opinions, you're leading down a path that's not true to you, and you're out of like alignment from who you are and what you're saying and what you value, and that will get picked up. People will resonate with that, and it will be off from who you are, and people will recognize that, and they will know that straight away. So it's not that I'm suggesting that we never show up and we be ourselves, because I honestly believe that's probably one of the most authentic things any entrepreneur could ever do, regardless of what business that they're involved in. I think an entrepreneur showing up exactly who they are is a great way to lead as a business owner, lead the team members, and also resonate with individual clients. But what I am suggesting to do is to first take a look at yourself and find out who you actually are. Like, what are the things you value? What are the things you take a stand against? What are your beliefs on the world? And look at those. And I think when you're able to like refine what those are and put them into constructive sentences, it's way easier to show up and just be you, because you now know what that version of you is, because you've taken the time to look at who you are. So I hope at some level that resonates, and I hope that some take value from this episode. And yeah, I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on this, and see you guys on the next episode.